TAO holders, we only have 16 days left until something absolutely insane happens for the Bittensor community, and that is of course the first halving. Currently, we are seeing a very interesting setup happening with TAO price, as well as things in the overall macro crypto market potentially starting to shift. And so this could mean a really insane opportunity to get into TAO at currently sub $300 prices, which would be really cool. So of course, we're going to be talking all about that, what's going on with the TAO community, what we can expect potentially after the first halving. Will Bittensor follow in the steps in the path of Bitcoin? What are we going to see exactly? We're going to be going over all of that today. So first off, let's talk about TAO itself, and let's go ahead and look at the TAO chart. Now, first off, you will see, obviously, we're doing a nice little bit of moving around and jumping around kind of prior to the sell-off starting at the beginning of November. We got above $500, and then basically since then, you'll see not following this trend line exactly, but you'll see it's been following, kind of relatively closely this trend line all the way down, basically going down only. We had about a week time period here where we were kind of bouncing around, and then after that, the sell-off was basically just pretty much constant, following a lot of what we'd seen from Bitcoin and a lot of the other cryptos in the crypto space. Now, you will see right now we are kind of just, I wouldn't say we're breaking through this trend line with gusto, but we are just kind of, meandering through the trend line, which is nice because we are actually seeing this break. Now, of course, we're not seeing a massive move to the upside. I don't think a massive move to the upside is necessarily required per se, but it is good that we are kind of breaking that trend line and we can just kind of start to find some different price action and movement from there. You will see to the downside, we have a support at the $266 level. You'll see we actually held up on that multiple different times, even just a couple days back. To the upside, we do have that resistance at around the $315-ish range, and then kind of up and up from there, all the way up, kind of pretty clear path all the way to about the $500-ish range where we were even just kind of a couple weeks back. You will see on the RSI, we did see a float down almost from overbought to almost oversold, and then we are starting to pick back up and get a little bit more momentum going on here, which is really good to see. So that's kind of the biggest thing that we are looking at so far, is overall the TAO chart looking decent, I would say. Now, of course, with the halving coming, and if we see this kind of impact TAO the same way it did Bitcoin, we could see some really major moves back to the upside. But recently, you'll see, TAO has pretty much been range bound. There hasn't really been any insane kind of move to the upside. We did see kind of a nice little run up here back towards the end of 2024, seeing a top of about $750. With the bottom being about $160-ish. And again, this was at the peak of like the tariff chaos going on here. So of course, but overall, I would say price has been relatively range bound and confined within, between $750 and about $150. Of course, a pretty decent spread, but as it relates to crypto, I would say this is actually a fairly healthy looking chart, with price being relatively consolidated primarily within the $250 to like, let's say $500 range, aside from, even just a couple outlier periods over the span of a couple weeks total, let's say maybe a couple months total since TAO has existed. So pretty interesting type of range that we are seeing here on the TAO token. I personally do think that when we do see this kind of high break here at the 750 range, we can see a pretty quick move back to the upside. You'll also see 1200 technically being the all-time high based on kind of the launch of the TAO token. So we'll have to see kind of exactly what happens here over the next little while, but I do think that this halving event is going to be a very closely watched halving event for basically everybody involved. So we'll have to see exactly kind of what happens there. The other thing I want to take a close look at as well is what's going on with the altcoin market, because the altcoin market is, of course, seeing a decent bit of some selling off. You will see that what TAO did kind of mimics Bitcoin more closely than many of the other projects, which is kind of interesting. And you'll see here, the reason for the Bitcoin sell-off is actually that BlackRock's Bitcoin ETF sold $2.2 billion of Bitcoin in November, which is an absolutely insane outflow. I mean, we've never seen outflows like this, which is really interesting, to be honest, because we've obviously seen tons and tons of inflows all the way basically since the beginning of the ETF launch. This seems like an insane amount, for kind of monthly outflows. Do people know something that we don't? Is this institutions capitulating? Is this, having to do with some of the upcoming potential risks with the, the MSCI and having, to potentially dump all of the Bitcoin from institutional balance sheets. What could this possibly be that is causing such a massive outflow? But this is something that we're going to be watching very, very closely to see why is this even happened? What is going on here? Because it's going to be really good to know why are people selling? What is some of the reasoning and the news behind this insane level of outflows? But when you look at something like this and you see that Bitcoin's only dropped about 20%, really not too bad. I mean, there has to be a decent bit of buying pressure here to offset something like this in a single month. That is a pretty aggressive move to the downside. And you will see here on the total 3 chart, again, now not related to Bitcoin, we're excluding Bitcoin because this is a TAO video. We want to talk about what TAO is doing here. We can see that altcoins generally have actually TAO is moving relatively similar to what we're seeing out of altcoins. You will see here on the TAO chart, we had kind of this lower low if you count the liquidation wick. If we don't count the liquidation wick from October 10th, then we will actually technically have a lower low happening in here, which we did not see. I guess technically we have actually seen a much lower low since October 10th, but then we also have seen that lower low back here in June, which I believe as it relates to TAO, we didn't see actually anything like that happening in June. So while TAO is slightly mirroring the overall kind of total crypto altcoin market cap, we are seeing a couple key variations and differences here. But I think the most important thing is if we look over the very recent past, TAO actually holding up much better, being only down, let's go check this out. We're only down probably a couple of percentage points from kind of wick to wick here. Yeah, about 5% down, kind of from the non-liquidation wick of October 10th to now, where if we look at the crypto total market cap, you will probably pretty quickly see that is not even close to the case. If we go from, again, not excluding the liquidation wick, but we go from wick to wick, we're about 15% down. So TAO is definitely actually held up much better than the rest of the average crypto altcoin market, which is a very, very good thing to see ahead of their halving coming up. So I do think that TAO is still looking very strong relative to what we are seeing from the total 3 market cap. Again, if we look here, you will see we very slightly did wick down below what I'm calling this red line. This red line is definitely cause for concern. If we were to move below this, this is something that we should expect to see, potentially further capitulation coming through altcoins. We've since recovered and held above this. We'll have to see kind of exactly where we move over the next little while. What I did mention several weeks back is the possibility that we break this $900 billion level and see a kind of like an April type of move here where we go below, things look scary, and then we come back up over the next coming weeks. It's kind of looking like we might be in that situation right now. If we continue to rally back above the 900 billion range, I would equate it to something like this, where of course we are still seeing higher low, and yes, even again, a higher low. So this, in my opinion, would still be relatively decent for altcoins. And of course, with TAO outperforming the majority of the altcoins, this could be a very, very good thing for TAO. So especially TAO over the past handful of months has been performing very well. I do think that there is a little bit of hype and speculation about how the first halving goes for TAO. And so there's a lot going on there. And again, if we see the reason that we're looking at things like the Bitcoin news and the total crypto market cap excluding Bitcoin is because, of course, TAO, while it is a very interesting project and has actually held up a ton of weight, I guess we could say, in the market right now, it does still move with the overall macro market, right? I mean, if price goes down, we're going to see TAO go down. Maybe not as aggressive as the rest of crypto, but it is, of course, still going down nonetheless. And so we need to be watching very closely of some of the bigger picture things that are happening in the crypto market to make sure that we are prepared for a possible impact on TAO, even if it is just collateral damage. But overall, with sentiment shifting, with the TAO halving in just over 2 weeks at this point, I think there's a lot of reasons to be bullish on TAO. You just may need to be prepared to hold it for a little while if we see kind of that turnaround and a continued bleed off of selling over the next coming months. So that is, of course, the risk that we are taking right now. Honestly, I couldn't tell you which direction the market's going to go. I think that there's a compelling reason to see a little bit of a kind of Santa Claus rally going in towards the end of the year. I also could see after that rally a continued further sell-off to maybe where we find kind of the actual lows. I don't really know. I also could see us continuing to kind of struggle and maybe just go flatline from here, and then maybe a little bit of a sustained move to the upside several months from now. There's so many different ways in which we could see this move that overall you have to really trust the convictions on the projects that you are getting into. You cannot let price do the conviction for you, because I think in this type of market, that is a very difficult and risky bet to be taking. So overall, hopefully you found the information in the video useful. If you did, of course, I do appreciate all of the support. It is, as you probably obviously know, a difficult crypto market. So any of the support that I can get does help a ton with, kind of just being found in the algorithm and getting pushed to more people, all of that type of stuff. So overall, if you have any comments, questions, anything like that, just let me know with those as well. Thank you all so much for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next one.